Hello, everyone. Welcome to the afternoon keynote. My name is Jenny Arch, Children's Librarian at the South Hadley Public Library. I'll be moderating this session. Or actually, it might be more accurate to say I'm taking a back seat because co-authors and mother and son team, Meg Wolitzer and Charlie Panek, are going to interview each other about their new middle grade book, Found Sound. Meg Wolitzer is a best-selling author of adult, young adult, and children's and middle grade books. And Charlie Panek is a music and audio producer and now a novelist as well. I am very pleased to welcome Meg Wolitzer and Charlie Panek, authors of Found Sound from Penguin Young Readers.
Hi.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for coming. So as you heard, Charlie and I are going to interview each other. And yes, sometimes we will obviously know each other's answers. I'm really excited because not only do I get to talk to all of you, I get to talk to my grown son, not just text him and then wait and wait for his reply. So this is a true novelty.
Yeah. Firstly, I'll just say that I've never done anything like this before, but I'm really so glad to be here. And I'm just thank you so much for having us.
Before we get started, I thought I would give you a really, really tiny summary of the book. Found Sound is about a boy named Felix, who's the middle child of three boys, and his younger brother is kind of an annoying genius, and his older brother has sort of fallen away from the family, Dylan, and he used to be a sort of bad boy. And Felix, in the middle, feels like nobody listens to him, so he's kind of tuned the world out. And he and his family go away for the summer, and Felix finds himself sent on a mysterious sound-driven scavenger hunt. I know most of you have gone on those. So that's what the book is about. And we're going to talk about how we came up with it. But I think the real roots of it are in the past, back when I was a much younger writer and mother, and Charlie was a teenager, which definitely had its moments.
Yes, yeah. It was really a serene, no fighting stretch of time.
Yeah, it
I think you would
was.
agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
But in any case, yeah, during those years, I should say I got into electronic music, not just listening to it, but making it as well. And that's where the book comes in. I discovered music made exclusively from what are called found sounds.
Can you explain that term?
Yeah, so that just means sounds that are made, that are recorded, I should say, and they're not usually musical sounds. They're kind of anything but. So no synths, guitars, basses, pianos. Instead, it's like a bag of like potato chips being stepped on, or a seagull, an air conditioner. So naturally, I really wanted to try this myself. So I got something called a field recorder, which is this. Looks like that, and it's a portable recording device. Yeah, and it just like field recorder, the whole found sound music, it really opened up a whole world for me. And the point is that I guess anything, if you manipulate it electronically, I discovered could be turned into something musical.
That's really wild. And it's what Felix learns to do in our book, coincidentally. And we thought that maybe it might be a little weird for us just to talk today about found sounds without giving you a little sample of those kinds of sounds. So Charlie put something together. I had nothing to do with it. I was here writing novels. What he's going to give us is kind of like an amuse-bouche. You know, those little free bread and tomato things that you get in a restaurant sometimes when you sit down, a taste. Charlie, explain what we're going to hear.
Okay, so I went out, and by out, I mean I walked around my apartment in slippers and pajamas the other day, and I recorded a few different sounds with my field recorder three. And I'll play each one in a second, and I'll show you right afterward an example of how it was manipulated electronically. And then after those three sounds and how I do that I'll play like a song comprised only of those sounds. And don't worry, this shouldn't take more than I'd say like an hour or so. Just kidding. It's a 15-second loop. But first, I'll just tell you what the sounds are if you can't tell. So the first one is the very, very squeaky door to my office. Then my toilet flushing, very glamorous. And then the last one is my cat Squid, who begs to come into my studio office all the time. And so it's his meow. Um, and I think I'll just do it.
Do it. very cool. I love that. That was great.
Thank you.
Um, you could call that concerto for door, toilet, and squid. Yeah.
Okay.
So Charlie and I listen to very different kinds of music, and Charlie's always recommending artists to me who I would never have known about or listened to. And then there will be like a quiz. Mom, did you listen to that? And I did. And I passed the quiz, graded on a curve. And then I'll send him things that I love, which are from so deep in the past that they're like fossils. Like everything on my iPhone is an ode to women with long hair and beads. Joni Mitchell, Carole King, all the greats from my own moody poetry writing teenage years. And Charlie listens to them too, or at least says he does. So let me ask you this. Here's a quiz. Charlie, which of those singers wrote Big Yellow Taxi?
Mm, I'm gonna say Joni Mitchell.
Oh, I am so proud of you, son. So we've taught each other different things, and that was really useful in the writing.
Yeah, so that do you want to talk about the writing process a little bit, Mom?
Yeah, sure. So in my view, and you probably have a different one, it was a lot of back and forth. So I might work on a scene between Felix and his family, and Charlie might work on a different scene. Felix has a friend, the next door neighbor named Marigold, um, the eccentric girl next door. So then we'd swap and get to edit and change the other person's work. And we agreed at the beginning that nobody would get offended if the other person changed something. It could be changed back. And I really, really recommend to any writers out there writing with a collaborator. It's so much less lonely, first of all. I did it once before with Holly Goldberg Sloan on our book, To Night Owl from Dogfish. When you write with another person, one of the crazy things is that when you go to sleep at night, you can wake up in the morning and more of your book got written while you were sleeping. It's a miracle. It's like self-rising dough. So I tried to convince Charlie that if he was going to write a book with his mother, legally, he had to move back in with me and his dad. And there's a law about family collaboration, but he did not bite. Nope. He stayed in Brooklyn with his girlfriend and his cats and his door and his toilet. And that is where he lives to this day. But I should ask you now, Charlie, what was your experience of our process?
Yeah, I mean, it was a good experience, I'll say up front, but it was definitely a learning curve, figuring out how to work with one another, communicate with one another. We would write separately, and then we would have these very long Zooms and emails and texts. And I should say, speaking of which, we read the whole book out loud, like to each other, switching back and forth like a dozen times or more. And that whole process, reading out loud, it really was, I found it to be really helpful and powerful. I'm sure some of it comes from having been read to when you're small, if you're lucky enough to have that experience. But I found that it's like hard to gauge what it is you've written until you actually hear the words out loud, the cadence, the flow. And then you're like, occasionally, oh my God, I was going to keep that one line in. It's so bad, but I couldn't hear that until I heard it.
Yeah, that line. That was really,
Yeah.
really not a good line. It would have ruined the book. Another thing I think with writing together is that two people, not just one, know the story and the characters inside out. And you can make jokes about it with each other. Like there's a certain line, not that bad one. And we always quote it to each other, something said by a minor character who's sort of a mean girl, and it still cracks us up. Charlie, I think you wrote that line, did you?
I don't, at this point, I really don't even know. I think I did
Yeah,
probably.
that's the thing. Like we don't know anymore. There's such, you just sort of give yourself over to the collaboration, which is something so terrific about the process. It's hard on a line by line basis to know. I mean, I've been a novelist since college. I sold my first novel for $5,000, and I thought that money was going to last forever. And in fact, I've almost run out. Amazing. But what I want to say is that writing of all kinds is my profession. I mostly write for adults, but I love my books for young readers so much. But Charlie, I don't want to embarrass you, but this is your first book, but he's really a natural and he has a real voice. And he brought something to this book that I never could. In addition to that voice, he brought knowledge about this world that was a new world to me, the world of sound. Because in addition to some of the basics of what sound is, like that sound is a vibration, he told me these really wild details that I had never heard of, and we used them in the in the sound scavenger hunt in the book. So, did you want to tell everybody about some of that?
Yeah, well, I've always loved sound clue things. I believe I was first introduced, the first sound clue, whatever you want to call it, thing was my dad, like 20 years ago, showed me that Beatles song. I don't know the name, where if you play it backwards, there's a message that says, Paul is a dead man, miss him, miss him, miss him. Thankfully, Paul was not dead. But yeah, I just remember like having this hair-raising feeling, and I think we both wanted to capture that, as I had felt that kind of special strangeness as a 10-year-old. Um, but yeah, so regarding with the book, one of the clues in the scavenger hunt, Felix, our protagonist, finds a cassette tape that has strange sounds on it. And one of the sounds he discovers has a picture in it. And I know, you might be wondering, how could you do that? How could there be a picture in a sound? Well, I'll tell you. There's something called a spectrogram, which is a visualization of the frequencies of a sound over time, if that makes any sense. So when Felix and his friend Marigold run the sound through software, an image of a man starts to appear, and it really creeps them out naturally. It creeped me out writing it, like the whole reveal. But I would love to take credit for this. But this idea of a picture and a sound comes from this artist, Aphex Twin. If any of you have heard of him, he's like a genius, revered god in the electronic music scene. And he famously put a bizarre looking picture of his face into a song, and you should all check it out. It's on YouTube. And I thought that was genius, but also very unsettling. So that's one example of a cool sound thing. Another one that we included is something called an anechoic chamber. And these are man-made chambers in which there are no echoes or reverberations, and they're considered the quietest places on Earth. I've not been to one. I would love to go to one myself. Maybe we can take a trip there someday.
Do a
But
reading
yeah,
in one.
what?
Do a reading in one.
Yes, do a reading in one. But the thing about an anechoic chamber is that apparently when you go into one, you feel very disoriented, because without the echoes, you can hear the sounds of your body much more clearly. So you can hear your own heartbeat, your saliva moving around in your mouth, which is, like, I know, very disgusting. If you turn your head, you hear the bones in your neck cracking. So very fun. So I'm excited we got to put that into the book as well.
So, and we also have these details that we didn't end up using, but they're on the blooper reel and they are in my brain forever. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're very welcome. Yeah, I always love this stuff. The audio nerd in me loves this stuff. But there's another quality that I think links you and me together, Mom, and that's our love of puzzles and games.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I tried to raise my children in a games family, if anybody out there can relate to that. We love anagrams and charades and lateral thinking puzzles, and I am personally obsessed with British cryptic crossword puzzles. Oh, and actually, here's a weird aside. The connection between music and puzzles. I don't know if anybody knows this, but during the 1960s, Stephen Sondheim wrote this brilliant cryptic crossword puzzle every week in New York Magazine. And there's one amazing clue that I love. The clue goes, broken harmonicas, speaking of music, broken harmonicas found floating in Manhattan. And you're like, what? The answer is 10 letters long. So the word broken tells you to break the word harmonicas, which means make an anagram out of it. And if you do that, if you make an anagram out of it, you get something found floating in Manhattan. Now you're like, wait, what could be floating in the island of Manhattan? That doesn't make sense. But then, aha, you go, oh, the drink Manhattan. And the answer, the anagram of harmonicas, is maraschino. So to me, that's like so cool wordplay. And Charlie and I are also serious Scrabble players, and we know all the two-letter words, which is key. We play online on this antiquated Romanian Scrabble server.
Yeah. When we'd finish a chapter of our book, we would reward ourselves with a game of Scrabble.
Or 2 or 10, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I know. It's terribly addictive. One more thing about that, when Charlie was a kid, he became a competitive Scrabble player. And you've heard of soccer moms. Well, there is such thing as a Scrabble mom, and they don't have to bring those orange sections that nobody wants to eat to soccer practice. I actually wrote another middle grade book years ago called The Fingertips of Duncan Dorfman, which is kids playing competitive Scrabble. So clearly what I'm showing you today is that I basically just rip off my own child's life for my writing, and it's worked for me. So how can I stop? But I seriously have always loved kids' books that have things to figure out in them, things that sort of get you excited and you want to sort of race to the end, but even get you excited all along the way. Like I loved Ellen Raskin's The Westing Game. And do you remember Elizabeth Enright's The Saturdays and Spiderweb for Two about the Melody family? I love these books so much. So there's a real reading history around this kind of of twisty book that you just want to figure out what's going on. But there's something in writing about sound other than that we wanted to get out. And I think it goes past the clue aspect. I talk about what a book is about a lot. I'm asked, what's your book about? But I also like to talk about what is it really about? And I think I'll turn this over to Charlie to take a crack at that. What is it really about?
Hmm. Well, I guess how important listening closely is for sure. Being on your own kind of scavenger hunt and finding things you never expected, paying attention. I think we all know what the digital age has done to us all, or most of us, myself included. There seems to be like a lack of patience, lack of care if something isn't contained in a 4 second long reel or whatever video before we scroll to the next thing. And while this book, it's not an indictment of the digital age, it's quite the opposite. It is a reminder to take in our surroundings, to use technology in a way that harnesses self expression. And found sound to me is really a love letter to our senses. I know the book is specifically about sound, but I think it applies to smells, sights, everything. That's all included. It's about finding something special in what we often overlook and take for granted.
Very well put. I think you must be a writer. There's another aspect that I want to get out, which is that there's a brother element in this book. I grew up with a sister, but I raised two sons. So writing about brothers was really intriguing to me. Did you draw on your own experiences as a brother?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there were bits of all three brothers in the book in me. There's like a little obnoxious know-it-all, like the youngest, Miles, and a slightly tumultuous teenage run, like Dylan, and being like tuned out, like Felix is, and then having sound draw him back in. Because as I said, sound and music was really formative for me. And mom, like Gabriel and I, my older brother, we never had a strained relationship like Felix does with his brothers. But Gabriel and I were very different. He was really into politics, and I even remember like in the 5th grade, he dressed up for Halloween as Mark Green, who was running for mayor, just like antithetical to me. And I probably was a clown. But given our differences, we had fights and small falling outs, as all siblings do. And mom, you often say to me, and you've always said, like that you hope that Gabriel and I remain close when you're older. And I've always taken that to heart. I really do. So I think it was important to me to explore the brother relationship in this book, to give it some weight. And yeah, it's like a fun and funny book, I hope. But it also has a seriousness to it too. I think it strikes a nice balance. And there's a lot, just riffing off that, there's a lot of cool sound stuff, of course. And I hope anyone reading it, young or old, who reads this can learn and go out to make their own music out of found sounds or not. And I will also say that it also is a story that comes to a kind of surprising and deeper conclusion.
Yeah, definitely. Without giving anything away, I agree. I did want to get to a little bit here as we get to the end about what makes somebody a writer. I mean, I don't know that anybody can really answer this question, but I've been doing this, I realized when I was thinking about it today, for 44 years, and that sounds insane. And I want to say, wait, that can't be true. I'm precocious. But no, it is true. But I grew up with a mom who was a writer too, just like Charlie grew up with one. And my mom, Hilma Wolitzer, is a novelist and short story writer, and she's 95 and incredible. And speaking of puzzles, she does spelling bee and Wordle, and we challenge each other every day and connections. And when she was 90, she published a collection of stories, her first collection, with the greatest title, Today a Woman Went Mad in the Supermarket. And I think if she hadn't become a writer when I was growing up, she would have gone a little mad too. And she always read my creative writing when I was a kid, and we spent a lot of time in the Syosset Public Library. Shout out to librarians, and shout out to Syosset and to Exit 43. There was an amazing librarian there named Adrienne Flukiger. Since we have so many librarians here today, I don't know if anybody knew her. She was absolutely wonderful. I loved that place and how much she would sort of recommend books to me, and how librarians and libraries were just welcoming. My first job was a page in that library, and sometimes after regular library hours, I got to show movies on old projectors. And I'd be in that building at night, and it was thrilling. It made an impression. So I think a lot of my early years really affected my decision to become a novelist. And How about you?
Yeah, I would say growing up in our apartment with overflowing books certainly had its impact on me. But yeah, circling back to what you just said, as for libraries and writing and reading, I remember fondly going to a library, the Society Library, I think, near our house as a kid and reading there with you and some Nook and Dad as well, being read to. And then one year when I was in the third grade, I entered a short story contest they had and I won. But yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to brag, but
It was
um,
really good. It was called Spine Language, and it was about books that, I'm sorry, I have to do it. It was about books that came alive at night and talked.
yes, it was. But why I only bring this up because I remember winning that and just having that contest at all. It gave me the encouragement to write and continue writing. And I don't really think anybody should overlook how important that is, especially at a young formative age. Um, but yeah, since then, I've gone into other things, other fields, music specifically. But coming full circle, I think it's really a pleasure to go back into writing again with you. And particularly in writing for young readers, some days it feels like being their age wasn't that long ago, even though it was. And Mom, I should just say, I know we're coming to a close here, but it was a pleasure to write with you.
It's a pleasure to write with you. Oh my God, no. I would hug
Thank
you,
you.
but we're in different boroughs right now. So if there are any questions,
Yeah, there are two questions in the chat. One is how long did it take you to write your book together? And the other one is curious about the cover. Oh, now I can be back on. Um, the other says kind of reminded me of Richard Scarry.
yes.
Oh,
It took a few years because we had some different ways that we were kind of going into it. So, and then there were periods of time when then we weren't working and were, so it's hard to know exactly, but it wasn't short, you know,
no.
and we were also working on other things at the same time, but definitely, a couple of few years, definitely. But that's sort of typical for me anyway. But so yeah, it's a long process always for me, kind of the discovery of what a book is.
Yeah, I don't have anything to base it off of as this is my first book, but definitely took a while. And I really thank our editor, Julie, because we would come to her with these drafts and they were very different in a way, but she found what she liked and really helped us craft it into what it is now. You
Yeah,
know,
working with an editor, I think, well, you are a sound editor, but working with an editor on a book is, if you have a good editor, as we do with Julie Strauss-Gable, it's a wonderful experience. You really learn to see things you can't see. Sometimes it's like one of those magic eye pictures, like I said about the line, like you stare and stare, and then um, the editor lets you see the hippopotamus that you couldn't see. As for the cover, yeah, it's a really cool cover because in a way it really gets to what the book feels like, I think. Like there's so many little details on the cover that you can look at, and the cover is the town. And I should say, we you're a librarian in South Hadley. Yeah, well, we went to Northampton, Massachusetts, every summer throughout much of Charlie's childhood. And this town definitely has a Northampton, Mass vibe. We hope, and we loved those summers. At least I did, and hope you did too. And the town, raising your kids in New York City is so different. I wanted to give them a kind of small town. It's not a small town, but I wanted to give them a town experience in the summer. And the cover has like little things you can look at, like the names of buildings and an ice cream truck and things that appear in the book, the names of things that appear in the book. So it's got a lot of little objects and like clues almost. So I really admire that. I think it's very much in keeping and it has a fun quality that I hope gives a sense of what the book really feels like.
well put, well put. Yeah, I love the cover. I mean, speaking to that, I think it does give that zaniness feel we were going for. I feel like the town itself that we've created called Blissfield, that's the name of it. It's sort of a character in its own right. It's got a feel, an atmosphere. It kind of feels in its own little snow globe. Yeah, a little bizarre, but grounded in some reality, I would say for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I now have two grandchildren. Again, I'm precocious. I have two grandchildren, and I love books where there are lots of little things to find, like Richard Scarry in Busy Town, and find the hidden pictures and highlights, and uh, of course, Where's Waldo? But even not even just in books that feature that, but finding the details, again, looking closely, which is, parallel to listening closely, which is so much a part of what
Mhm.
Felix starts to do in our book.
Yeah. There really is this, because the scavenger hunt element of it, that, you could classify this as a mystery, certainly, because they're trying to figure out, who set this up for us, or for him, for Felix. Although Marigold ends up helping him with a lot of it. So they're really in it as a team. And did you discuss the pacing? I mean, it's sort of with a scavenger hunt, like one thing leads to the next, leads to the next, leads to the next. So you have that almost built-in momentum.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, that our editor definitely helped with that.
Yeah. We had some chapters that she definitely came to us and was like, this doesn't progress the hunt, and that was true, honestly, looking back at it. It was, I think, the clues and how we were putting it together behind the scenes definitely informed the pace.
Yeah, I mean, for me as a novelist, like I'm often with my adult books very interior, and I'll have somebody, like emptying the dishwasher and thinking about their childhood 30 years ago. And then we suddenly have to say, now she picked up a fork and put it in the drawer. I'll have to like get back there. But that's it's a different pacing than this book. And I think having the thread of they're all sounds, and they each have to build some, I hope, emotional and exciting and surprise conclusion. Um, it involves two levels of thinking about the writing, the emotional interpersonal level between the characters, and then the actual just story, what the reader needs to want to know.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that was, done very effectively here. And Felix, I was just skimming back, his feeling at the beginning is that he's the middle child that he's not listened to. And then this whole book becomes about listening and hearing. Um, and, he's able to connect more closely with the people in his life through these sounds.
Cool.
We have 1 minute left. I don't see any more questions. Do you guys have any one more thing you want to say about the book, an elevator pitch, or a book that you think it would go well with? If a kid liked one book,
Wow.
who is this for? I guess, is it for fans of the Westing game, or somebody in the chat mentioned from the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frank.
Oh,
I was
yeah,
actually
that's a
just,
good one. I
I was
like
going to
that.
say that actually. Yeah, they stole my answer. Oh, and Charlie, in the chat, somebody says Aphex Twin, always so amazing. So just so you know.
Yes. Well, there you
Yes.
go.
Definitely, an E.L. Konigsberg kind of kid, but not just that. I mean, I think that it's funny. We didn't really get to sort of dwell on that. The relationship between Felix and Marigold, and Felix and his annoying little brother is we have there's real humor, we hope, in there. Just, and not like we dropped a joke in. It's not like Mad Libs. I think the best humor comes out of characters. I think for kids who just want a fast-paced story with something that they need to figure out who Anonymous is, who is sending these anonymous sound clues to them, but also, somebody who's like willing to absorb and take in new things and maybe be excited about learning something new, but it doesn't feel like, it's not, it's just a story filled with new stuff. So I think kids who like things like that, which was me and I think Charlie when you were younger.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Charlie, you had mentioned the anechoic chamber before, but there was also something earlier in that scene, I think, about acoustic levitation. And I
Oh
had to
yeah.
look it up. I was like, that doesn't totally sound real, but it's real.
I know. No, that was new to me too. That was new to me. For sure. I could not tell you I did at one point do research, but I could not tell you how that works. But things can float through sound, basically through frequencies. You could
It's
float a little paperclip or something.
And there's something called ferrofluid that
Yes.
Yeah, that's
there's
very cool.
That I had seen before at a museum. So I was like, if all of these
Mhm.
other things are real, probably this is real too, but I did have to look it up.
That's what we decided to do, that everything is real. And the sound scavenger hunt is real in our book and possible in the world, but all invented.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, that brings us to the end here. Thank you so much for this unforgettable discussion. To all the librarians and educators out there, thank you for everything you do to keep stories alive. Next, we have two concurrent panels. There's Whimsy, Wonder, and a Touch of Magic, and Zando Book Club picks. Thanks so much for joining us today, and happy reading.
Jenny.
Thank you so much.